slashing staff, crushing unions, and selling out the VA for what? So billionaires can make more money while veterans sit on wait list. Or worse, they'll get no treatment. Our president was asleep while Musk was at the wheel. Do you know what happens to a serviceman when they fall asleep when they're on duty? Veterans don't trust him. He's not one of us.
So that was Eric Rodriguez. He's a veteran of the war in Iraq. He was reacting to the news that the Trump administration is cutting thousands of jobs from the Department of Veterans Affairs. On that, the AP reports this, quote, the Department of Veterans Affairs is planning a reorganization that includes cutting more than 80,000 jobs. Wow, 80,000 jobs from the agency that provides health care for retired military members. The VA's chief of staff told top-level officials at the agency Tuesday that it had an objective to cut enough employees to return to 2019 staffing levels of just under 400,000. That would require terminating tens of thousands of employees after the VA had expanded during the Biden administration, as well as to cover veterans impacted by burn pits. For some veterans, that means not just worrying about what this means for their health care and their family's health care. They could also lose their jobs entirely. More than 25% of the VA's staff and workforce is made up of veterans. Paul Rieckhoff is here. Also joining us, MSNBC political analyst Tim Miller, the host of the Bulwark podcast. Paul.
So I've warned that they're going to come for the strongest and biggest places first. And they went to the Pentagon first, and I have tried to warn people they're coming for the VA next. It is a place that has a large federal budget. It has hundreds of thousands of employees. It's culturally very important. It's symbolically very important. And this is right on strategy. I've warned folks that Musk is going to come for the VA. And now his flamethrower of destruction is firmly focused on the VA. They see how big it is. They see how valuable it is. They see how important it is culturally. And they are firing 80,000 people as a start. There's still a lot more way to go. And 25% of VA employees are veterans themselves. But 1/3 of all government employees are veterans, right? So I think that they are coming at us very hard. And I think in some levels there's a silver lining here because they've misjudged this. Because the purge patriotic people, I think, are going to become the foundation and the core of the opposition. Whether it's somebody like CQ Brown, it's the fired FBI workers, or it's the now thousands, probably tens of thousands of veterans, they are going to organize. They already are. They're protesting at VA facilities. They're protesting at Tesla dealerships. And anybody who crosses veterans politically in American history usually pays a price. So this may be the leaders we're looking for, are people like that guy Rodriguez and others who are going to rise up to this moment and pierce through the crap.
I want to believe that. I'll grab onto that. It'll get me through the next hour and a half. But I want to understand why veterans believe Trump is interested in dismantling an agency that is on the other end of a desperate call or a health crisis. And in a lot of parts of this country, frankly, a lot of red states in this country, they're hours away as it is. Why weaken that fragile lifeline?
Because I think it's part of the larger strategy, which is to take down the government to its studs. And for decades, the Koch brothers and others had a grand vision of ripping down the VA and privatizing it. Pete Hegseth was the leader of Concerned Veterans of America, which for years advocated for ripping down the VA and privatizing it and sending it out into the private market. And I think that this has always been a prime target for them, regardless of whether or not veterans are there. And I think the insight here is they don't care about veterans. They don't care about anyone. They care about an ideological agenda and seizing the levers of power. And what I would tell folks is if they treat veterans like this, if they treat retired generals like this, how do you think they're going to treat everyone else? How do you think they're going to treat you? We are just first. But this is a line they're going to work their way down. It started with DOD and now they're at VA.
Tim, it's almost boring to frame a question this way, but I'm going to do it anyway. Another thing that people thought was sacred is being annihilated, again, not in back rooms, not in leaks to print reporters, but on TV. Here's Alina Habba.
Well, as you know, we care about veterans tremendously. I mean, that's something the president has always cared about, anybody in blue, anybody that serves this country. But at the same time, we have taxpayer dollars. We have a fiscal responsibility to use taxpayer dollars to pay people that actually work. That doesn't mean that we forget our veterans by any means. We are going to care for them in the right way, but perhaps they're not fit to have a job at this moment or not willing to come to work.
Veterans are, quote, not fit to have a job at this moment or not willing to come to work, end quote. That's them in their own words on veterans.
Yeah, boy, that's. I think that's probably a video that will come back to haunt her. Even if not, it is cruel and dismissive and nonsensical. I mean, like, there are just a couple of practical points I think are worth making. One, at the beginning of the clip, she talks about tax dollars and like being a good steward of tax dollars. And so I think that, us being two former Republicans, I can speak to this. I still really care about that. Obviously, there are Democrats that care about that too. I still think the government's too big. Like, this is a farce, right? Like, if you actually cared about balancing the budget, if you actually cared about government waste, like, this is not the way you would go about it, indiscriminately firing people while planning to pass a massive budget busting tax cut through the Congress. Like, that is their plan. They've put forth a budget already. Even in the best spin that they give, where they have MAGA economists cooking the books, even those people say it's going to increase the deficit by $1 trillion. Like that, and the reality is probably it's going to be more like $5 trillion. So they're not trying to be fiscal stewards. They're not trying to balance the budget. This is, as Paul said, an effort to tear the government down to its studs, to punish people, to go after foes, and to reward political allies that they want to replenish the smaller government with. So like that is what they're doing. Also, as a practical level, it's just so gross what she says there about people aren't able to come into work or not willing to come into work to do the job. It's just it's so stupid. They don't even talk to regular people that are working in the government. Like, I was talking to somebody, who said that their friend is a veteran and has PTSD. I think it was actually Ruben Gallego that was telling me this on the podcast. And he said that he was talking to somebody that, has issues, having been a veteran, has medical issues. They live like 50 miles from the office. And so they now have this new rule where you have to drive into the office. So, you're in the car in traffic an hour both ways. You get there. They don't have enough desks for you because they haven't actually done the work to do this streamlining thing right. So then you go into the office and you're like standing around in the break room just because Elon Musk said, some billionaire South African immigrant says you have to be there. When you serve the country, you're doing your job, you're doing it well from home, right? Like, again, it's not as if they're like, okay, we've done a review, some of you aren't doing enough work from home, you need to come back into the office. It's none of that. It's just indiscriminate. It is cruel, and they're doing it because they want to gain as much power in the federal bureaucracy as they can.
They're also trying to erase the steps taken by President Joe Biden to deal with burn pits and that massive effort, which was a huge effort, a recent effort. I guess least importantly, a political accomplishment of Joe Biden's, but that didn't seem to be the point when the work was being done. How do you see that?
Devastating. I mean, we fought basically for 3 decades to pass the PAC Act, right? And that provides support for toxin exposures all the way back to Agent Orange. So this is what Vietnam veterans were fighting for, in addition to burn pits. Folks will remember Jon Stewart had to go down to Washington and shame them into moving this forward. But I think it's part of this larger agenda, which is about getting people to give up, getting people to quit, getting people to say, you know what, it's too hard to drive in, I'm out, right? And getting people to surrender so that they can remove opposition, consolidate power, and move the overall agenda forward. And veterans are a pain in the ass, right? If you can get thousands of them out, that's going to be beneficial to your political agenda. The problem is they're going out into protests. They're going out into veteran service organizations. They're going to run for public office. And I view this in a different context than the normal political one. This is almost like the anti-war movement, right? You're seeing people speak out. You're seeing people be brave. And I'm not looking for members of Congress. There are new John Kerrys. There are new Bobby Muellers that are going to emerge.
It's going to come from the public. I think you're right. I think we've had this. I think we've crossed through this passageway where you're not looking to an elected politician to save you, right? You're going to look at how responsive they are, but I think you're absolutely right. And I think just to tie to your first point, to the point you're making now, the attack on the truth is so that people can't talk to one another with shared truths and push back against lawmakers. And that's why they're calling on, I mean, Tim Miller, they are telling Republicans to stop having town hall meetings.
Yeah, well, they are, because I guess why, right? Like, none of them
Right.
were being very deft at convincing anybody that the reality that they're living is not true, right? And so instead, I think that they're going to go into the safe media spaces where they know, how they can manipulate the conversation and try to advance propaganda. So, I just want to throw one more thing on top of what Paul said, because I do agree. I talked to Amanda Littman, who runs Run for Something, this morning, and she's like, every time there is a purge in the federal government, their group, which encourages and helps organize people run for office, has seen an influx of people who have signed up and said they're interested in running for office. And she said that it's more now, I think in the first 3 months, than almost the entire 2018 cycle. They've almost passed it already. And so I do think you're saying this. And I think that folks that are laid off from these veterans organizations, or veterans that have been laid off within the government, I think are prime people to go out and do that. And that may not be like the mass protest movement or something that people see, but it could be, as Paul points out, like individuals stepping up and saying, I'm going to run, and that having a ramification down the line.